Today we're talking to Roz Stevenson, someone who I have great affection for, I love, in fact, and someone who I make no secret about the support and inspiration that she's provided to me in my career, as well as countless others in Hollywood. Roz has written a book that chronicles her career in this industry, in the entertainment industry, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So welcome, Roz.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be talking to you and so happy for you offering the foreword. It was just so beautiful and pretty much brought me to tears. I was like so taken by that. Thank you.
Well, I am glad. I am glad. It brought me to tears too, thinking about just such a critical role that you played, in my journey, professionally. So what motivated you? What was the inspiration behind writing this book, this memoir?
The inspiration was the fact that I've had a fulfilling career, and so many people behind the scenes are never written about or write about themselves. It's all about the stars and the filmmakers. And I just looked back at my career and I thought it just came out so beautiful. And I would talk to people about various things that happened in my life and my career, and they were like, "You should write about it." And so I just decided I would, and I'm happy that I did.
So, I mean, it's pretty much in chronological order. What made you? I know that you're from Los Angeles, or you certainly grew up in Los Angeles. What was it that made you want to pursue a career in entertainment? And I know that as a child, you had, growing up here, you had various influences, but still, what made you want to put yourself in the industry at a time when there weren't a lot of, the representation was so low, especially?
It began in 1964 when my father received 5 tickets from Sam Brown, who was executive director of the Motion Picture Academy. And my father had a lucrative janitorial business where he did windows and floors, and he was a client, and he admired my father. My father was all about family. He was a scout leader, and he was very active in community and church. And so he was always talking about his children and how much we loved movies. And he thought that that would be a nice gesture. So for us, that was an incredible experience. And that's where my book starts, because that was my motivation. I was a huge Sidney Poitier fan, and that was the night that he won for Lilies of the Field. So I just was like, this cannot be the end. I got to somehow find a way. I didn't know how. I didn't know people that worked in the industry. And the Watts riots happened. After that, just like the aftermath of all of these racial and social injustice situations, people began to look at what was the cause. And so there were a lot of programs through the anti-poverty program that Johnson put in place. There was also a federal mandate forcing the studios to hire minorities. My husband came through the federal mandate. I went through an anti-poverty program for drama and theater in my community. And eventually we were asked to serve as extras on a lot of movies. And the first movie I had an opportunity to work on was Lady Sings the Blues as a policewoman. So I was thinking I was going to be an actress, you don't think about what your gift really is. And I really loved acting and I appreciate good acting, but I wasn't the best actress. My gift was something else. And I had to discover that. And I had the opportunity to go in different situations and see what I could do, because I wanted to do something that was meaningful. So I worked in TV. I worked at Good Times TV show. And everywhere I worked, I always did as much as I could to advance myself. For Norman, I was an assistant to the executive producers of the show. And through that, I was written teleplays. I worked with the Minority Comedy Writers Program. I assisted our staff. The one Black writer we had on staff was Bob Pete, and I assisted him with that program and sending out letters and reading scripts. And so I always did a little bit more because I wanted to make a mark.
When did your career in PR begin to come into focus?
It came into focus, and the reason, let me just say, my book is called Look at God, My Hollywood Walk of Faith. And I was raised up in a Christian household, and it may not be so for many other people, but for me, I totally let my Christian upbringing go when I first started in Hollywood. And when I had an early marriage that failed, had 2 children, still trying to be in the industry, I began to search for a church home for my family. And it made all the difference in the world. And that's what I talk about. I think a lot of people don't associate Christianity or religious or spiritual upbringing with Hollywood. But for me, it worked out beautifully because I had my own ideas and God had his. And I'm telling you, I did not go to the publicity department seeking a job. It fell in my lap. And when it did, I said, what do you guys do here? You know, and began to investigate what was going on in that department. And I thought, I can do everything that they're talking about here. This is me. And so it just came to me, and I moved on from there.
So, I mean, how did it happen?
Well, what happened was I went to MGM Studios after I had remarried, had a new baby and all this. And my idea was I was going to be a production manager, which you have to start as a production coordinator. In the meantime, you couldn't apply for jobs at MGM until the union said you had to work 6 months as a temp. I had just completed working 6 months as a temp, and my first assignment was in the publicity department. A week after I had been there, I got an opportunity to bid for a job as a production coordinator. This is what I tell young people all the time. Do not lie on your resume, because that's what I did. I added a film because the only production experience I had was in TV. So I was talking to my husband before the day that I went on the interview, and I said, man, I wished I had a movie I could put on here. And my husband said, put that movie I worked on, Sunnyside. Nobody ever heard of that movie. So lo and behold, I put it on there, and I go and I hand the lady my resume, and she goes, Sunnyside, you didn't work on that. I was the coordinator on that movie. So, you know, it just wasn't to be. And the interesting thing about it was the lady ultimately offered me the job. She says, you know what? I love your enthusiasm. I know you didn't work on it. I told her who my husband was and that I had been on the location, and that the unit production manager let me shadow him. So I made it look good, but it was a lie, and she knew it. And so I couldn't, in all honesty, just sit there every day and say, these people know I lied on my resume. In the meantime, in the publicity department, I was asked if I could help this new executive set up her filing system. Previously, I'd had a job with the Watts Health Center where I worked with a efficiency expert setting up standardized filing systems. So she went on a retreat and left me a pile like this of all the things that she had to work on. And I've sat on the floor and dealt them out alphabetical and got the whole thing set up. When she came back, it was beautiful. And that one thing, something that I hated as a job before, turned out to be the thing that made me stand out in the department. I mean, people came by like it was a new baby to look at those files like, did you see what she did? You know, and it was just the president, whenever he wanted files, he would say, call Roz, have her bring hers, because it was all in chronological order, blah, blah. He bypassed his assistant. So he was the person who I went to and told him I wanted to be a publicist. I knew that he respected the work that I'd done. And if I had any chance at all, just go to the top and ask the top guy. And you know what he said? You're the only person that ever came in here and asked and had a plan, because I knew that the studio would pay for me to go. I found out they had a program at UCLA, but I had to have the approval of my department head. And so he said, if you want to go, I'll sign for you to go. I'll pay for it. I went to UCLA and for a year took courses in PR. And when I came back, and finished, he made me a publicist.
So, okay, so you were you found an advocate, you found someone who believed in you.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about, making the transition as a Black professional in the industry. What were the challenges? How, there weren't many of you. So I guess you had to find your basis of support outside of our community and form alliances with people from different backgrounds. But you tell me how were you able to build and develop and transform yourself into a Black professional in the industry?
It was a process because there were other Blacks that came in, and one of the things that you have to do is learn how to get along with the staff. And they're always very curious about us, and they want to know everything. And you just have to be patient with them, and you have to be non-confrontational, because the minute they felt, especially at that time, that you were militant or angry or something, that was like always held against you, and if they were afraid to deal with you. So I just learned how to get along with the staff. And it really wasn't that hard, because the work was so demanding and we were going from one film to another. You really didn't have time to deal with a lot of the pettiness that went on. And yeah, I was always the only Black. You see pictures of me at a premiere and it's the whole staff. It's me and the white folks, maybe an Asian guy.
So what about having your voice heard? What about establishing your credibility, your authority in those types of environments?
It was really important to know the information about the Black community, because like many of them do not know like how small of a percentage of the population that we are. At that point, we were like only 11% of the population, but we were over 25% of the film going audience. So you have to arm yourselves with those kind of facts so that they know whenever you're trying to get a cover on a Black publication or something, and they would have, a talent would have a manager or agent or publicist who was white, who doesn't know any information about us. You had to always educate them about where we stood. I remember particularly trying to get Janet Jackson on the cover of a new publication. That time it was like the younger version of Essence. It was Honey Magazine. And it was perfect for her because the Black audience, which they understood in records, the power of the Black audience, but in film, it wasn't so. They always thought that if we do it on Entertainment Tonight or we have it on Access Hollywood, everybody sees it. Blacks see it and everybody else. If we have it on the major radio station that's popular with them, no, we have our own radio stations. We have our own newspapers. We have our own interests. And so that was the thing, to really know my community, know what we had to offer, the power of the Black colleges, all of those things, all the organizations, the fraternities, and just the groups like NABJ and how powerful that was. I love doing work with organizations like NAPJ because they're communicators. So if you do something wonderful with them, it's not only their information, but it goes to those who they extend their population that they reach out to. So that was the kind of thing I did.
Talk about, I mean, some of the early figures that you worked with, you know, like Sidney Poitier. And I know you got a chance to actually work with him, and also Bill Cosby, and, you know, all the many others that you have encountered over the years.
Well, I worked with Sidney on the last film that he directed, and that was Ghost Dad. The movie was not a success, but the star of it was Bill Cosby. But I learned so much on that, and it fulfilled one of my dreams, was to work with him. Uh, Cosby is a force who saw that he knew me well from Leonard Part 6 because my husband worked with him on that film. So he was wondering why my husband wasn't working on this film and some of the other popular people that he knew, because he did actively always try to get as many Black crew members on his projects that he could, which was one of the things that a lot of the others do not do. It's not anything they even want to get involved with, but he did. So Harlem Nights had started 3 weeks before Ghost Dad, and everybody who was, or the top people in the industry, they were all over there working with Eddie. So he wanted to know every day what's going on over there with Eddie and Ed and Richard and everything. So he decided, you know what, Roz, we should have a softball game with them. And we created this event, $25,000 from Paramount, $25,000 from Universal, to have a softball game at Loyola Marymount. We had catering, we had 1,500 people. Everybody was able to bring their entire family, and it was tremendous. Sinbad was the person who commentated the softball game, and it was just a lot of fun. Ghost Dad won, but that wasn't even a deal who won. It was just a whole day of a lot of fun for Black folks and their families who never usually get a chance to interact with the stars. So it was a great thing that we did, and it got a lot of press because uh, Eddie and Bill Cosby had never met. So that was the coin toss that we did. The shot went, Associated Press, CNN, everybody picked it up. It was their first time meeting one another on the mound, because he had really done a lot in his comedy acts because he could impersonate Cosby, but they had never really truly met.
Wow. I mean, you've been a part of so many noteworthy moments in cinema. Talk about working with the Kennedy family during Cry Freedom, and what that experience meant to you.
Oh, that was awesome because I actually was at the Ambassador Hotel the evening that Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. My cousin worked for Pierre Salinger, and I went with her that evening. And so we were caught up in a history-making moment, So when we did Cry Freedom, we had four or five premieres. One of them in Washington, D.C. was hosted by Ethel Kennedy. And so we went to her home for the after party for that film, and just got a chance to tour the home and just enjoy a meal. She did an interesting thing where we couldn't sit with the people that we came with. Everybody had to pull a table number out of a fishbowl, and you had to interact with people that you didn't know. And we were like really didn't want to do that because everybody there were political figures and we only talked Hollywood. So we were concerned about that, but it turned out to be that was something she did all the time. Anytime she had something, she was a very shy woman. And Sir Richard Attenborough just thanked her profusely for opening up her home. She had done so much for the anti-apartheid movement, and she just was really humble. and thanked us for coming and just said a few words, and that was it. And I think the next premiere that I attended for that film was in Atlanta with Coretta Scott King. So that was just an amazing moment also to get an opportunity to meet her. Andrew Young was there, and everybody who was a who's who of the civil rights movement was at the premiere that night and at the event. So I've had some wonderful experiences.
So now, away from all of the gloss of Hollywood and the red carpets and the long hours, you have been in a wonderful relationship with your husband, Robert, who,
Yeah.
of course, is a noted hairstylist in the industry. Talk about how both of you have managed to balance such busy careers while also, you know, balancing and growing your life as a couple.
Well, it wasn't easy, but it was fun because I was going to find a way. Anytime there was a holiday, long holiday weekend, or whatever, and I was going to be on that set. And it was one of the things that turned out to be wonderful for me because a movie set is a family. Well, when you're making a film, and so I met so many people long before I was a publicist on movie sets visiting my husband, you know. And so my children, that's what they grew up. They didn't go to Knoxbury Farm and Disneyland on their summer vacations. They went to whatever movie set Robert was working on. And they've had some incredible experiences. And I chronicled them in the book, which a lot of people just really are fascinated with that. My kids just always knew as they became adults that they had had extraordinary experiences that most kids don't have. They got to meet Christopher Reeves on the set of Superman 3, along with Richard Pryor, and see them getting rigged to do the flying sequences and things that are just extraordinary moments. And just to go into another place like Canada and to see how clear the air is. My kids were like, this doesn't look like LA small, you know? I mean, just extraordinary experiences. And if you went to a place where my youngest son and I were on the set of The Color Purple, we were there the night that Whoopi uh, showed her Broadway comedy HBO special to the whole crew before it went on TV. And we knew then that we were in the presence of someone who was going to become famous. At that point, she was just known as a comedian. And, and when you could see what was happening on the set of The Color Purple, and we knew that it was going to change the direction of her life. And we just knew we were around greatness. The other person on that set was Oprah Winfrey. She, at that time, was a local talk show host who really begged her way into that role of Sophia. And she kept saying, my name is going to be on that poster too, because I'm going to be somebody important. And she was. She became that. So Danny Glover and all of them, there was just a magnificent set to be around everybody while they were making that historic film that got 11 Academy Award nominations.
So, I mean, how did motherhood help your career and not hinder it?
Uh, as a mother, you learn how to multitask. So a lot of what I had to do was innate because I had very active sons who were in sports. I always had to coordinate with other mothers. If you take them, I'll pick them up. And, you know, and sometimes that didn't work. My boys had cars that broke down, you know. I started them driving at 15 and a half, you know, as soon as they could. And to many exciting adventures with that because the boys weren't really ready to be drivers and to know that when it says the oil light comes on that you should attend to it, you know. So it was a lot of it was a learning experience. And but I have pretty good kids, and there were so many other people that helped me keep everything in line. And
Your mom and your sister and your extended, immediate and
yes,
extended family.
yes, yes. My one sister, I talked about my oldest sister, she was, and we babysat for one another all the time. So there was never any cost involved. It was just, we did that because we're sisters. And our kids are still very close today. That sister is just a year older than me. She's been in a nursing home for 3 years, said she had a stroke. And her daughter is like my daughter. And we're there every week hanging with my sister and, going over old times, because my sister was a very fun person. She lived right near you in Village Green, and she was very active in Black Women's Network. She sold books for Scholastic. She was a community activist. So it's just really, been heartbreaking for us to go through that with her, but we're hanging there. And
I understand. I
I took her,
understand.
I took her on sets with me on the one press junket that I talk about in the book was for the movie Pure Luck, when we went to Acapulco, and I took her because I knew we all had individual villas, and how lovely an experience it would be, and there was no cost involved, except for the flight. And my sister made friends with everybody, set up her spa treatments, sightseeing, meals, and everything before we touched down in Mexico. So those are the kind of things we talk about that are wonderful today. So she remembers what great times we had.
Talk about the industry during the time that HIV and AIDS was really just sort of running rampant. What were those years like?
Well, we have a large gay population in publicity. So it was really heartbreaking in the department at Universal when I was working there. We lost 4 of our staff members to HIV/AIDS, and my boss was actually going through the process of losing his companion who had AIDS, and we watched the effect that it had on him. He became addicted to drugs, and it was just a very sad time. Nobody knew what, if someone was said to have had AIDS or something and they went and got coffee, nobody else wanted to drink the coffee. It was just scary. And I remember when the boss wanted to bring his companion to work so that he wasn't sitting around the house feeling sorry for himself. So one of the ladies was out on vacation, and he put him in her office. When she came back, she was horrified because she didn't know whether anything was just like COVID. If anything, you could touch your desk or your keyboard or whatever, and you could become infected. You didn't know. So it was a very sad time. But you know what? A lot of the people that were in our department are still living today. They had the cocktails, and they went through a lot of different stages of medications, but eventually that cocktail has made it possible for them to still be living and still flourishing in life. And I'm still really close friends with a lot of the people who went through that experience.
Well, that's good. That's good. Let's, I mean, God, all of the different movies that you were a part of, Waiting to Exhale, Nutty Professor. I mean, let's go through it. We can't go through all of them. Let's go through the top 5.
Well, I'll start with, but Waiting to Exhale actually wasn't a film that I worked on. That was Robert. I was on the set. But Nutty Professor, we were so taken by Eddie's ability to do 7 different roles that there was talk in our department about nominating him for Best Supporting Actor or Actress in each one of those roles that he played. It was just an idea that might have been able to happen. I don't know, but they didn't ultimately do it. But that's just how extraordinary he was in that role. I always worked with Eddie closely, and that was another one where I knew him previously through my husband working on his films, Coming to America, Another 48 Hours, Harlem Nights, and all of those. So they're always very comfortable if they can associate you with someone who they were comfortable with before. So that was how that worked with him. And even his publicist many times would not go with him if I was in working on the project. And that's what happened when we went to Orlando for the grand opening of Universal tour in Florida. I was the person that went with Eddie and his family and got him through all of that grand, what was it? They had this, big parade, the grand opening events, and his whole family came, and it was a lot of fun.
What about some of the Tom Cruise movies that you worked on?
Yeah, the one Tom Cruise movie that I talk about in the book was a little known film called Far and Away, and his co-star in that was the first film for his then wife, Nicole Kidman. Tom is not easy to work with, and he required the press to sign waivers that they would not sell his stories anywhere except for the outlet they were listed for the junket, that kind of thing. If you wanted the interview, you had to go along with it. And so I got along with Tom. My problem that I had on that particular occasion was his new publicist, who wanted to try to make a great impression with him. And she told me that his day would start at 9, which everybody started at 9, but it would end at 5. The junket didn't end till 6, but we had to make it work. And so, it turned into a thing when everything was going along fine until at lunchtime, his family, his sister wanted to celebrate the publicist's birthday, and they went 15 minutes into the lunch hour. So when I came back, I was working with a 15-minute deficit, still making it work. Tom didn't really realize what had happened. And I turned around to get Sam Rubin from Channel 5, and the room was black. She had pulled the plug. And so it was quite a scene where Tom ultimately had the light turned back on, and he did a really nice interview with Sam. And she pushed me out in the hallway and just read me the riot act. And I was trying not to go Compton because I could, but I would just, my better thoughts came in my head that I just needed to just walk away from this situation while she was ranting and raving and screaming at me in the hallway and putting her finger in my face. And I went home and was contacted by my boss, who said, "I'll put you with somebody else tomorrow. I heard what happened." And I was like, no. I did everything that I could to make that day work, and she needs to be apologizing to me, But anyway, the next day she was in front of the hotel waiting for me when I arrived, and I was like, what is going on? But so she apologized and said she had a pinched nerve and whatever, and that Tom just thought I had done an extraordinary job and he wanted me to come back. And so, it all worked out. But you run into that kind of thing. But what happened was Sam Rubin put it on TV, the whole experience. And so it was a taped interview, and he called out her name and everything about how she tried to keep him from getting his interview and how wonderful Tom was. He didn't really know that Tom had set up that rule, So it was one of those lessons that I learned that I didn't have to do anything, that the situation became noticed by the TV audience, by my staff, and then the president of the studio asked for the tape to come up to his office because they wanted to see what was said. And so it was a great lesson that I learned. Just, I don't have to do anything. If you're doing something right, it'll come out.
What about working with Denzel?
It wasn't really difficult working with Denzel. He's not a fan of doing publicity. He wants his acting to speak for itself. And so he would always cooperate, but he didn't make a big fanfare out of it. The one movie that was the last one that I worked on was American Gangster. And that movie could stand on its own. And he had directed and starred in The Great Debaters. So that movie was coming out 10 weeks after American Gangster. And he was busy editing and trying to make that movie a success and going to give all of his help to that film and let our movie just get out there, which it did. Our movie did extraordinary. It was very successful. However, it didn't get the Academy nominations that I thought that it might garner. The only one that it got was for Ruby Dee, who had less than 12 minutes on screen. And so, you know, I enjoyed working with Denzel. It was never a problem. I did Inside Man with him. It was, and which surprised me that at that point, that was the highest grossing opening that he ever had. It was also the highest opening of a Spike Lee film. So that was great to work with him on that. And we did a special that was done by Stephanie Frederick for BET, Inside Men, because they have an extraordinary friendship. And he and Spike talked about their children and their careers and everything. And it was great. It turned out a wonderful special that we did on that behind the scenes of Inside Man.
And then, of course, you worked with Jamie Foxx, and probably certainly one of his greatest roles. What was that like?
You know what? That is my favorite project of all the projects I worked on in my career. And it's because when I first saw the movie, at that point, it was called Unchain My Heart. And I saw the rough cut of it. Even in the rough cut, which means it's longer than it will be fine in the final. I saw his performance. I was a huge Ray Charles fan, and I'm going like, oh my God, Jamie Foxx is about to win an Oscar. I knew that he nailed it. And so it was so exciting for me to just, I was telling everybody, I was telling all of you guys in the press and everything, just wait till you see this movie that Jamie Foxx does on the life of Ray Charles. It is incredible. So Jamie was willing to do any and everything that we asked for the movie. So that makes it wonderful. There was no pulling teeth or any trying to back out. And I don't want to do it. He wanted to do everything. And so it made it just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And my husband has been in the Motion Picture Academy for a long time, in the makeup and hair branch, but we had never really tried to go as guests. A lot of people don't know that there's, at that point, were 6,000 members of the Academy. There are only 3,000 seats, which means only 1,500 really with a guest can attend. So it's a raffle. You have to send your money in January, and they pull and let you know whether you've been accepted as a guest. And we got our check back and said, unfortunately, we were not. So I'm one of those people that calls and says, well, maybe I should have said mezzanine, not orchestra. And he was like, ma'am, the tickets are gone, but I can put you on a waiting list. And they did, and I was told how the procedure went. I was out of town the weekend that they were supposed to make the calls. On that Monday, when I did get back home, the phone rang and it was the Academy saying that they had the tickets for me. And so I was there the night that he won. And when he won, that's the bookends of my story. I started when I stood up and applauded Sidney Poitier in 1964. And here it is, 2005, 40-something years later. And I'm standing up applauding a movie that actually won for the best marketing campaign of the year that I worked so hard on. So that was extraordinary. I'll never forget it.
Well, I remember I was right there. Talk about, let's talk about us. Let's talk about the role that you played in, onboarding so many Black journalists, journalists of color, and providing them with those very critical access points. to become established in the industry. What was I'm curious as to how you made all of that happen. It seems so effortless, but I'm sure you probably had to
You know what?
employ your craftiness.
You know what? I have to say that Michael Moses and Jeff Saxon, who were the heads of our department, they had full confidence in me because they had worked with me on staff. And so once I started my company and I would try to add new press, they never gave me any trouble with that. And even on staff, they were always happy when I would bring somebody new to them and justify why this person was important to our community. Like I said, you have to arm yourself with all of the facts, and you have to be able to know and what they bring uh, to the marketing campaign. And so you have to stand up for them. You're really like the agent. You're the person that is in between the journalist and the studio, and you just have to justify each person. And they came to value my expertise and my opinion, and I just am so grateful for that because there are so many people who still work in the business today that say, if it wasn't for you, I never could have gotten in there. Because once you get at one major studio, then you can get on the list for the others. And once you're on that list, you're on it. You know, it's just that simple. You just have to make the best of it. You know.
Yeah, no, I can remember. I mean, after getting added onto Universal's list, how every other list in town just became
Yeah.
available. And
Yeah.
of course, I was a hard worker. I still am, but in
Mm-hmm.
making sure that that happened. But it was just getting on the Universal is such a big studio that
Yes,
it said something to be added onto that list.
that's right.
I remember when I met you in your office. But are you surprised that today, because back then, I remember when you retired, and I mean, it was literally standing room only with people just, from every walk of life in the
Yeah.
industry, showing up. Um, and we really did feel that, I mean, your presence, your contribution definitely made a difference. But now we're here in 221, and we still find some journalists going through some of the same challenges, some
I know.
publicists still going through the same challenges of being able to break in, of not having those opportunities that you work so hard to provide, um, be accessible to them. Let's talk about that for a second. Where would you say we're at, and what do we need to do to recapture those glory years that you were a big part of?
I think we've lost ground, but I think junkets in general have lost ground because the cost involved. Well, right now you can't even calculate anything because of this COVID situation that we've been in. But prior to that, I would get calls from the press saying I'm no longer on their list. Wonder what happened, and I don't know what happened. I just uh,
Is
feel
it that we're undervalued? I think that's what a lot of people,
yes,
that
yes.
our audience is undervalued, and so therefore so are we.
Uh, Unfortunately, that's what it is, and so I don't know what the press can do on their own to try to make it better, but I think that organizations like yours are just making an impression that it is important and that we should be considered in that whole group of people that make the film going audience. And like I said, the facts are that we are moviegoers much more than we are in the population. We really support films. Money talks. So whoever is the advocate for you, or you're advocating for yourself in the Black press, you have to have all that information and present it to them. And it's one of the things that they can't deny. But I'm just thinking that this whole time now is so hopeful that we're in, I think we're in a transformative time that's not going to really go back, because a lot of the things, they, when the pressure is on, they're on it. And soon as they see the pressure is off, then they start. And really, it's more about economics. They don't want to pay. You know, uh, it's a continuous fight. I really just don't know, but except for to say that organizations can really have an impact. Congratulations on the award ceremony you did virtually this year. It was beautiful.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I mean, when you see her, I know that you remember and very much were a part of the Tree of Life Awards.
Oh yeah.
Talk about the show and I guess how AAFCA, I guess, has sort of stepped in to sort of continue that legacy.
The Tree of Life Awards started many years ago when I think the first time we went was in the 80s. And there was three businessmen from the East. I never really I wondered all the time what their purpose was. I think they just wanted a presence in Hollywood, and they had the money, and they had the advertising companies, and they just came here and decided we're going to honor our own. And it was just done so beautifully. They had gorgeous invitations that were black with gold embossed of the statue that they would give out as the award. It was made in Africa. And they had a image of that in gold on the front of it. And they got with the most respected African Americans in the business, Sidney Poitier, Cicely Tyson, all these people to be a part of their board of honored, who would honor the people who were nominated, and also those who they deemed worthy who may not have been recognized by the mainstream. And it was always a very special night. It was only like 200 people in the beginning. The very first one we went to, matter of fact, was at the Brown Derby. It wasn't even a dinner. It was refreshments and the acknowledgement. But then after that, they saw what an impact it had and how appreciated it was by the African Americans in the film industry, that they made it most of the time it was at the Beverly Wilshire. And they couldn't get people to sit down. Black folks were so happy to see one another and talk, and at the, in an intimate setting where it was just us. And it was just always a beautiful night. For many years, Bernie Casey was the MC, and he couldn't get people to sit down. They would, and then many times as people received the awards, they would start to cry, because it really is a struggle out here, and it's a lonely struggle. And so to be shown some appreciation and be thanked for what you do was just wonderful. It was always an extraordinary night.
Talk about that, because that's so true. It is a struggle, and it can be a lonely struggle. What advice would you give to, professionals in the industry now about keeping it together and maintaining their, protecting their mental health as well as their physical health while trying to grow a career in this industry?
Well, that's a struggle with all of us trying to keep ourselves healthy, because you can burn your candle at both ends, and you really have to know when enough is enough. The reason I call my book My Hollywood Walk of Faith is because I continue to be a part of a church and involved in the spiritual side of life, because you can't just make Hollywood your all in all, because there's no compassion there. People will care if something happens to you or something, but you have to look out for yourself, and you have to know what's good for you and what works for you. You have to put yourself first. Hollywood's gonna always be there.
And I guess it helped having a husband, having a family, also having the church.
Yes, yes. And you know that for African Americans, the church has been phenomenal in civil rights and so many of the issues that we have in our community. It's a church. I'm involved now with West Angeles, who's been very involved in the vaccinations, food giveaways, and that kind of thing. And so you just have to also care about your community, not just what's going on in the industry. You know, um, I was very sad when we had the Oscars last week, and I thought it was a foregone conclusion that Chadwick was going to win. And from what I am understanding, that was heartbreaking backstage because they changed around the way that the evening would go to make that be the big splash at the end of the night. You never know. You never know. And actually, when Anthony Hopkins won, my husband did his ballot, and it was just a foregone conclusion that he was voting for Chadwick. And honestly, he had not looked at the other films, which you're supposed to. And he said, "We better go look at the father." Oh my God, what a performance. I'm serious. That was a performance from beginning to end to watch this man come have Alzheimer's and deteriorate the way that he did in the end, sobbing and asking for his mommy. That was just a performance out of this world.
When people look back on your professional life, how do you want to be remembered?
I tell my grandkids that nobody is perfect, and I just wanted them to have something where they can look and see that no matter what happened, I dusted myself off, I got back up, and I kept going forward until I found the perfect job for myself, the perfect opportunity to make a contribution that was worthy of people looking at it and saying, you made a difference. And I just hope that that's what people feel, that I made a difference.
Well, you certainly did, my friend. You certainly did. Thank you so much for
All
this
right.
opportunity. And yeah, thank you.